reflecting on aspects of craft practice which have been very much part of the sort of discourse around craft since the 19th century, which have found new currency in the debates about slowness, and in the face of concerns about sustainability and globalised capitalism. It seems that the sort of as the rise of the slow movement has happened, craft has been allowed to talk again about things that have been very important to us all along, really. They've been a consistent part of what craftspeople have experienced. A key text for the field in the last year or so has been Richard Sennett's book, The Craftsman, which really asserts the importance of slowly learned skills to our well-being and our experience of being human. I've asked each of the panellists to reflect individually on the way their practice connects with slowness, and I've asked Carl to give us a kind of overview of the slow movement, and to try and then we can have a more open discussion amongst the panelists first of all, and then later with the audience about how those things connect. So, Shelley, would you like to kick off?
Yes, well, when I had my first initial discussions with Helen, I hadn't really spent very much time actually thinking about this aspect of my practice. It was just something that I did, and I'd been doing for a really long time. But actually, it's been quite rewarding thinking about this slow movement in relation to how I work. And very quickly, I realised that my practice was like a dance, and it was sort of a slow, quick, slow way of working. And this had been something that I'd been, doing for years and years and years. I trained as a tapestry weaver, inherently slow, hand weaving cloth. And confronted with the question, how long does that take you? Every step of the way, people would ask me that. And can't you get a machine to do that for you? And it's not that I'm trying to make things difficult for myself. I just want to just make it right. And for me, this was the only way that I could achieve the aims in my work.
Gary, would you like to?
Yeah, it's, I work in a little workshop with one other person, and we both carve stone and wood and that kind of thing. And it's really interesting it's unusual for me to mix with other craftspeople and to hear that using something soft like material is actually exactly the same as working in something hard. You can get a machine to do certain things which would make no difference to the outcome, but you always have to assess, or at least being slow or being a craftsperson is assessing what the outcome is and looking very carefully at what it is and wondering whether it's as good as it would be if you made it by hand. And usually it isn't, and it's not because of some sort of worthy anti-machine thing. As Shelley said, you're not trying to make it difficult for yourself, but it's simply that the working process leaves a patina on the surface of what you're making, and you can't replicate that in any other way. And that's not a philosophy, that's actually just part of the process. There's no alternative to it. Also, if you're making something by hand in stone, the material can only actually be removed at a speed that's dictated by the material.
I make furniture, design and make furniture, and I use machines quite a lot. I think maybe partly because I trained as a designer, not as a craftsperson. I've kind of ended up being a craftsperson. Most things we use in machines, they give us more out than we put in. And I think that's the kind of essential definition of a machine. A chisel's a machine in a way, a hammer is. So I've got no qualms at all about using electricity and things that save me a lot of time in the workshop. I don't want to be in there any longer than I have to be, really, because we already work very, very long working weeks. I'm sure all of you, work really, really long times, and it's there's other things to do as well. So I think there's that kind of a nature of efficiency approaching it to an extent as a designer, but then if we think about craft, the word crafty as well. I think if you want to be crafty about what you do in a kind of, not in a devious way, but in finding appropriate solutions. And I think Gary used the word appropriate, that it's not doing things just for the sake of it, but it's because that's how things are done. The driving force is autonomy, and people's ability or desire to make decisions about what they're up to within their studio practice, and it's an idea of recognising the consequences of actions that so often, with a lot of working patterns and with a lot of modern life, there's a disconnect between the coming in of the task, the doing of the task, and then the going out of the task. That even the way that is controlled through money, we've watched the last 6 months be where the abstraction of capital and money be so apparent that it's based on language. The confidence of commodities controls what we do. And I think this idea of having a consequence to what we do is something that we're all fortunate enough to see. We see material come in, we know that it needs stuff done to it, and we do that, and then it goes out the other side and we see the results of that. So often with a working life, someone might not see that so concretely. It might be an abstracted sort of idea.
Well, I'm I guess the odd man out because I don't actually make anything physical. I make sentences, and mostly on a laptop. So I won't talk so much about that to kick off. We might come back to what slow means for crafting words later on in the creative process on the page. But for now, I guess my role is to give you a fast overview of the slow movement, so you kind of know roughly what's going on. And just because of what I've written and what I do and what I talk about, I get sent a lot of dispatches from the front line in this culture of speed and slowness and so on. And some of them are amusing and others are horrifying, and some are both. And I got sent one a little while ago from a friend who lives in Vancouver, Canada. And she said, you know, my favorite art gallery is hosting a drive-through exhibition. And I'm just going to say those 3 words again, so you drive-through exhibition. But I mean, things like that aren't really surprising, are they? Because I think this is the world that we live in now, a world stuck in fast forward, obsessed with speed, with cramming more and more into less and less time. For a lot of us, every moment of the day now feels like, even away from work, feels like a race against the clock, as the speed has become almost like a combining form. It's become our universal default option. When we try to make anything better, we speed it up. Don't we? There's, speed read, speed dial, speed walk, speed date even. And there's a gym near my house in London, here in Battersea, that now offers an evening course in speed yoga. And I'll leave it to your imagination to work out how that operates in practice. But I think, it's easy to laugh at some of these things, but there's a serious point here. And I think that is that we're often so caught up in the headlong dash of daily life. We're so marinated in this culture of speed and hurry and busyness that we often lose sight of the damage that all of this rushing around is doing to every aspect of our lives, to our health and diet, to the quality of our work and the way we make things, to our relationships and communities, and of course to the environment. And more recently, we've seen what speed does to the economy, because obviously the mess we're in now is down in great part to the fact that things were moving too quickly, too fast in the financial markets. No one had time to lift up the bonnet and see if the motor was overheating. No one had time to pull apart the collateralized debt obligations or credit default swaps or derivative contracts to work out whether they were worth the paper they were written on. It was all about fast consumption, fast growth, fast profits, making a fast buck.